less than 1% were female. Many American GIs met and married Korean women. The first wave of Korean wives had arrived in the early years of Japanese occupation as picture brides. This second wave came as GI war brides.
11 war brides, 10 Korean and 1 Chinese, but all from Korea, arrive in California with their husbands. It's a happy homecoming for all concerned, a new home far from the terrors of battle-scarred lands. 3 of the couples bring their blessed events with them.
From 1951 through 1964, 28,000 Korean women immigrated as war brides.
Love is international, and here is definite proof.
The outgrowth of the Korean War was a significant wave of immigration based upon American compassion, a compassion that expressed itself in, we've got more than we can ever use, come join us at our table. And a lot of the Korean people were ready to make that transition.
With the returning GIs, news of the Korean War's effect filters back to the U.S. In rural Oregon, one couple, Harry and Bertha Holt, watch a documentary film about children orphaned as a result of the Korean War.
There certainly had been other wars, so it was the vision of Mr. and Mrs. Holt, who saw a film, and they were incredibly moved by what was happening to children in Korea. And what they knew was that children belonged in families.
The Holts already had 6 children of their own, but decided to adopt 8 from Korea.
Portland's International Airport, October 1955. His wife, friends, neighbors have come to welcome home an Oregon farmer. Harry Holt returns from Korea and brings back as his own 8 war orphans.
Seeing firsthand the large-scale need for adoption following the war, they decide to do even more. Harry leaves for Korea while Bertha heads a campaign to get international adoption legalized by Congress. In addition to taking care of their family and farm in Cresswell, Oregon, the Holts begin the first large-scale international adoption program.
When Korean adoption first began, it was an extraordinary social happening. It had never been done before. Children from one country had never immigrated to another for the purpose of adoption, from one race to another, one ethnicity to another. And there was a great deal of concern about what would happen to these children and how would they fit in. And so my parents, along with the parents at that time, were told, you must Americanize your child as quickly as possible. The concern about fitting in was given priority over connection to birth country and culture. We came as children, we came as babies. We weren't the typical immigrant that came as a grown-up. We came to a family, and it was the deliberate choice of our parents to bring us. And so we didn't immigrate here because we wanted to come. We immigrated here because adults wanted to bring us here.
She arrived in 1956 as a 4-year-old. Her Korean birth mother had named her Sun-kyum, or pure gold. Her new American adoptive family called her Susan. She was born during the war to a Korean woman and an American GI.
There was no possibility for me to really have a good life in Korea, given the circumstances that my mother was Korean and my father was not. And that simple fact would have followed me always. It was the stigma of orphan as well as the stigma of being mixed-raced.
Susan grew up in a small rural town. Her parents also adopted a Korean son. Susan and her adoptive brother were the only non-Caucasian residents.
I didn't feel different. I felt I was much more American by osmosis because that's what I knew from day-to-day living. I was always aware that I looked different. When you're looking out, you don't see those differences. It's people looking at you that recognize them and generally feel pretty open about just pointing it out to you as if somehow you didn't know that.
She grew up like any other American kid. She was even crowned a dairy princess in high school.
I grew up in a tiny little town. I mean, there were 500 people in the whole community. I didn't meet another adoptee until I was 17 years old. In a very short period of time, we knew each other better than childhood friends that I had known as long as I could remember. And it was based on this common experience that was so deeply profound and felt by both of us. And, you know, we were both very happy, I would say well-adjusted 17-year-olds, but it was the, did you ever feel this? Did this ever happen to you? Kind of conversations that we'd never had with anyone else or even known that there was a longing for.
Even after half a century of Korean immigration, the community is extremely small and isolated. There are few Korean stores, churches, or organized cultural groups. The passage of the Hart-Celler Act in 1965 opens the door to Asian immigrants of skilled labor, students, and professionals seeking economic prosperity in the U.S., bringing the third wave of Pacific pioneers to American shores. Early each morning, down at the port of Portland, a Korean man of unassuming stature is seen lingering, looking for ships from Asia.
매일 제가 그 보트에 한국 배나 일본 배를 찾아가가지고서 제가 일본말을 좀 하기 때문에 찾아가가지고서 그 사람들의 쇼핑해주는 거, 관광시키는 거 매일 했고.
The Korean man, a Presbyterian pastor, would approach the Asian sailors and offer to hold a service, take them sightseeing, or back to his house for a home-cooked meal. The sailors, stuck at port while their ships loaded cargo, were eager to take him up on his offer.
보통 그래서 제가 멀티너머 포에 매주일 가니까 그 미국 사람들이 뭐 너는 어떻게 돼서 매주일 여기로 오니 내가 혼자 오는 거 아니고 지금 이 한국 시면, 일본 시면을 데리고 이렇게 매주 오는데 예배 후에 데리고 온다 그래요.
Reverend Sung Jung Kim was originally from North Korea. During the war, his family fled to the south, walking the entire length of the peninsula on foot. In the spring of 1959, Pastor Kim meets his future wife in Busan. The meeting was arranged by a matchmaker. Over the course of the summer, Kim sends her love letters and eventually convinces her to marry him. The two wed that fall. They had only seen each other once before their wedding. In 1961, Pastor Kim arrives in America to study theology. His wife later joins him. Between Pastor Kim's sermons, driving, and job instruction, as well as his wife's cooking and support, the two pioneer a rather unique Korean ministry.
이민 오는 사람들이 중요한 게 뭐냐 하면 아파트를 얻어야 되고 아파트를 얻은 다음에 아이들 학교를 보내야 돼 학교 찾는 거 문제고 그 다음에 학교 찾는 거 문제 되면은 운전을 해야 되는데 운전하려면 운전 퍼미트 하는 거 드라이빙 테스트 하는 거 차를 사야 되는 거 그걸 전부 내가 데리고 다니면서 통역을 하면서 설명을 하면서 했기 때문에 심지어는 이 DMV에 가게 되면 지금도 너 옛날에 사람 많이 데리고 와서 통역했지.
In the years of his ministry, Pastor Kim helped over 2,000 people from Korea find jobs and housing. Each morning, he'd get up early. His wife would pack sack lunches for the men that he would help and drive them to the job site in his van.
Jesus Christ and God.
He was supported by his church with a monthly stipend of $100, but otherwise was not compensated for his generous volunteerism.
밤 12시에서 조금 소리가 오면 그다음에 아침엔 또 8시 일어나서 또 나가려면 도와줘야 되니까 그래서 우리 아이들이 그래서요. 우리 아버지는 우리 아버지 노릇을 안 하고 젊은 남 노릇을 했다고.
In Korea, during Japanese occupation, while the imperial government was trying to erase any Korean identity, it did allow people to become Christian. Christianity became a form of Korean identity and was a way for people to congregate. Taken across the Pacific, Pastor Kim translated the need for congregation and community into a new land of different circumstances. Church became more than simply the sacred, but also served a secular need for service and a social center for a young and growing community. In the 60s, America's attention is again turned to a war in Asia. Just like the Korean War before, an Asian nation is split between North and South, a leverage point between superpowers. As the Vietnam War escalates, Tae Hong-che is sent by the Korean military to South Vietnam to serve as a hand-to-hand combat expert. Like John Im, Che was born in Korea in 1935 during the Japanese occupation. The family was very poor, and Che had to work as a paperboy in addition to attending school.
하루는 내가 신문을 가지고 배달하는 데가 도장이더라고. 그 보니까 그냥 운동을 하는데 참 재미나기도 하고 무섭고 해서 내가 어떻게 운동 좀 할 수 있냐고 그랬더니 조그만 놈이 제일 나이가 어린 놈이 운동을 하고 또 신문을 들고 왔으니까 너는 안 돼 웃으면서 넌 신문이나 이게 돌려. 그래서 또 그 이튿날도 가서 물어보고 한 일주일 했더니 우리 그 선생이 나를 머리를 쓸어주면서 너 대견하다 그러면 힘들어도 한번 해보라고. 그래가지고서는 신문을 일찍이 팔고 와서는 운동을 하는데 운동은 안 시키고 밤낮 그 청소만 시키더라고.
After about 20 days of cleaning, Che was nearly ready to give up. It was then they told him that he had a good work ethic, and it was time to start the training. Che learned quickly and earned his black belt after only 2 years. Taekwondo became a way of life for Che. By 1962, he'd won the Korean National Championship. 2 years later, he goes to Vietnam to teach U.S. troops hand-to-hand combat. After service in Vietnam, Che is sent to Washington, D.C. to train CIA and Secret Service agents. By 1972, as the Vietnam War draws to a close, Master Che and his family move to Oregon with $500. The family rents a cheap house in southeast Portland, sleeps on the floor, and eats from the one plate that they own.
I had a 1954 Volkswagen. I buy $45 buy. Every day my family push, starting. That's why my children started thinking American car only push to get started.
During this trying time, Tae Hong-che turns to what he knows best.
I started Taekwondo 1972 in YMCA. At time, no one recognized Taekwondo. No one in Taekwondo very new.
Kung Fu arrived with the Chinese at the turn of the century, and the Japanese brought over karate as early as the 20s. Master Che begins teaching at community colleges, holding demonstrations, and drawing more students into the Korean martial art of Taekwondo. To earn money in the summers, Che, like many immigrants to Oregon, picks berries. One day, in a strawberry field, he meets the Pak family.
We understand they in Korean. We ask them, you are Korean? They very surprised. Yeah, we Korean. We never see Korean people coming pick up the strawberry.
At the Pak farm, Harry and Rock-sun, or Rocky as her friends call her, host large picnics and gatherings in their home.
We're going to have a potluck and everybody bringing a good thing to eat. People get together those days.
The Paks helped form the Korean Society of Oregon in 1967, and both volunteer terms as its president. To Rocky, born and raised in Korea, the reconnection to Korean food, activities, and students comes as a welcome addition. Following Korean tradition, Rocky's mother moves in with the family. To both women, it is important to preserve Korean ways and language in the home, but Harry, who is American-born, speaks no Korean. Raising their children splits the cultural gap wide open.
My mother came here in 1956 and stayed with me for 36 years. She's a strictly Korean way of raising the kids, what to say, whatever. And Harry is another way of an American way of. I was in the middle. I tried to please this husband, trying to please mother, and I was in the middle. And it's not that simple. It was not that simple.
Trying to navigate her role between her Korean mother and American husband, Rocky struggles as she sees her kids become more Americanized as they grow up. The pioneering efforts of the second wave in the 1960s and 70s firmly established the Korean-American community with churches, stores, and social organizations. But it would take the next generation to face difficult, more abstract frontiers, forging a fine balance of Korean-American identity.
A lot of Koreans that come here, they have college degrees and they graduated college and some even had great jobs in Korea, but they come here and it's not acknowledged, it doesn't matter.
Michelle Pak's parents immigrated to Oregon in the early 1980s to seek greater economic opportunity. Both of her parents worked. Her father is a local businessman, and her mother started a dry cleaning business.
It's not the most glorifying job. It's a lot of hard work. Even if you do know the language, it's a lot of hard work, just trying to please customers and producing quality, work. But add on top of that, not knowing the language. If I just think about it, it's heartbreaking. She works 12, 13 hours a day, and she comes home, and I don't know what goes on during the day, but I see her come home and, she just starts to cry. As I got older and I kind of observed her at work, it was the most degrading thing she could go through, anyone could go through. Just because she can't pronounce a word or she doesn't understand, her grammar is not perfect, people will think she doesn't understand what they're saying. It's so great to see how she's overcome that. And that's why I see her as my role model. I think it was more of a struggle for them to learn the language here and to understand American culture. But for me, it's trying to come to terms with the fact that I don't know if I'm Korean or if I'm American. I don't know, those Venn diagrams where you're Korean and there's an American, and then the middle part where you're a different category, right? That's how I feel I am.
I just hope that they do know what's American, what's Korean, and they can choose the good things and mix together and better life.
Yeah.
The first generation of Korean immigrants face questions of immediate needs like food, rent, and education for their children. The sacrifices of the first generation allow the second a vantage point to ask broader, more abstract questions.
Throughout history, in my family's history, it was about the sacrifices leading to hope. Hope for the future generation. My mother, her mother shares a lot of stories with her, and so then my mom shares stories with me, and so my mom shares stories about like my father's family, and so I feel like I get a wealth of information. 엄마는 Korean American 무슨 뜻이고?
우리나라는 이게 더군다나 여자아이들 참 교육을 잘 시키거든. 코리안 just 이제 여자는 이렇게 하면 안 된다, 저렇게 하면 안 된다, 이렇게도 잘 가르치고.
Even though I'm 26 years old, she always checks up on me and making sure I get home, at a reasonable time, or even if I come home late, she's always up waiting for me. And that's kind of the struggle, I think, because my mom has grown up with a lot of restrictions in Korea, and her values are a little different. And for me, growing up in the United States, it's like, well, my friend does this, why can't I go out too? Or I don't understand. And I know that sometimes growing up, there was a lot of just a lot of clashes that way, definitely, because I am going to school with my friends and they're able to do whatever, but I'm not able to, and not understanding. And
How about right now? You understanding me?
A little bit. I think my parents do try to kind of hold on, to preserve, to kind of give us, my brother and